Dats. Welcome to the podcast you've been waiting for. Great perspective and exclusive interviews.
It's a hard job for those guys because it's happening fast.
The kind of Saints insight and fun commentary you won't get anywhere else.
We've got plenty of technology to speed things up.
It's time to kick off your Been There, Done That Saints podcast, where we hand it off to our host, Mike Nabors, and Super Bowl winning linebacker, Scott Shanle.
Proud of these guys.
Superdome going crazy over the new quarterback. Teddy Bridgewater just rolls off your tongue, doesn't it? Teddy. You could even do Bridgewater. Teddy Bridgewater, the hot man in New Orleans right now. Welcome to another Been There, Done That podcast. Speaking of quarterbacks, we talk to Drew Brees each week. Nobody does in terms of TV. We're going to bring that TV interview to life in our podcast and have Brees talk about his future, that video he put out, along with his thoughts on Teddy Bridgewater. I bring in my team here, Scott Shanle and Justin Thomas. First, Mr. Shanle, we talked about Steady Teddy the last couple weeks. He kind of managed the game. I didn't know if he had a game like that in him. I was surprised. How did you feel about that Bucs game?
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised. I know Teddy's a good player, and we said it, or I said a couple weeks ago when he got thrown into the fire at LA, and everybody thought, what can Teddy do this? Should we have signed him to a deal? He's getting paid too much money to hold the ball that long, and it's just tough to be thrown in the middle of an NFL football game. I don't care how talented you are. And now you're seeing his potential after 2 weeks of having all the reps in practice, getting more comfortable. And I think the most encouraging thing to me, besides his stat line, which was great, was just the offensive coaches believing in him and opening up the offense more, throwing the ball down the field, getting involved. That was a good sign.
Yeah, very Brees-like day, really. I mean, 26 of 34, 314 yards. Bridgewater doesn't throw for over 300 yards that often. That was the sixth time in his career he's done it. And this is only the second time he's thrown for 4 touchdowns in one game. And it really came at a good time. Justin Thomas, our producer, our voice of reason. How'd you feel about Teddy ball game?
I was one of those people. I didn't necessarily doubt his talent. I just didn't know if we would see it or see the kind of game he had. I was really impressed, and it also makes me wonder, you got to think that Sean Payton has got to be one of the top candidates for Coach of the Year. What he's been able to do with Teddy and the offense and make it work for him has been amazing.
Let me speak to the elephant in the room, okay? I ended my unbeaten streak. I thought the Bucs would win that game. I believed in the Bruce Arians magic with the 55 points against the Rams, but the Saints do what good teams do. They exploited the Bucs. They took away their best players on both sides of the ball. We're going to get to my interview with Marshon Lattimore in just a minute. But Marshon Lattimore held Mike Evans, who's a proverbial all-pro wide receiver, one of the best in the league, 0 catches. By the way, the only other time he had 0 catches was against the Saints' rookie year. And then you had Shaq Barrett, who's on pace to become the all-time leading single-season sack record. He was on a milk carton. I mean, we see it with the Patriots, Scott, but the Saints took away the best player on both sides of the football, and that was so impressive in that game against the Bucs.
Yeah, there were a lot of things. Obviously Teddy being the main storyline, I thought the Saints defense and their defensive line in particular played well. But when you start looking at individual matchups and battles, and one of the highlighted battles was Marshon Lattimore and Mike Evans. Mike Evans, one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, and he's going to get his targets. They're going to take their chances with him, and they didn't do that throughout the game. And that was mainly due because of the coverage, the tight coverage on him. So if this Saints team can continue to rush 4 guys and win those one-on-one matchups up front, and these DBs, especially Marshon, he keeps covering like this, I just don't know how you can beat this team if you're an opposing offense and you just don't have a Hall of Fame elite quarterback, because I don't think anybody can just line up and run the ball on this team. I don't think anybody can pick on any one of their DBs. Just a lot of great matchups that were won individually throughout the game.
Yeah, let's talk about Marshon Lattimore, his 3rd season in the NFL. What I've always liked about him, he's never acted like anything phases him. I mean, he shut down Mike Evans his rookie year. He was pushed by Mike Evans. It was kind of a back and forth with he and Jameis Winston. He almost kind of had that chuckle at the end of the game, like I got the last laugh, but it wasn't in a trash talking way. It was in a very confident way. Here was Marshon Lattimore after the game where he shut Mike Evans and the Bucs down, and I asked him about the Saints defense moving forward after such a great performance.
I feel good. I had to come in and win unanimously like he did the first game last year, so that was the goal. Coming here, play one play at a time, be consistent, shutting him down. I didn't know I was going to hold him to no catches, but I just came here, ready to dominate, and, I got the win today.
Shanle, that is confident, not cocky, personified.
Yeah, I think the one thing about it that I really liked is Marshawn referred to getting beat last year, and that stuck with him. And you could just hear in his voice that he used that as fuel for this time around, this matchup. And I think that's what great competitors and great players do is they don't let their bad performances hinder their future performance, but they use it to motivate them and fuel them. And so I love that he referenced that game because as a former athlete, I know exactly what he's doing. He's using that as fuel. And Marshawn's playing back up to that all-pro level like he did his rookie year. And for this Saints defense and this team to get to where they want to get to, they're going to continue to need this performance out of 23.
In the Sean Payton era, I think the Achilles heel has always been the secondary. For so many years, the secondary wasn't good. The offense was good. Many parts of the defense was good, but the secondary really hurt the football team. When the secondary was good, you guys had your run in 09 and 10 and 11. Now we see the secondary's been good, and it's been the last couple of years, and obviously they're good this year. That's really been, to me, a theme in the Payton era. When the secondary's good, you see how that kind of translates to their success.
Absolutely. I've said that. Just like you referred to, our most successful years is when we had safeties who could take the ball away, corners who could cover man-to-man coverage. And I think a lot of it is people lose sight of the fact that because Coach Payton and the Saints are usually going to have a good offense, usually means the other offense on the other team is going to have to be more aggressive because they're going to have to keep up with Drew and that offense. So that means throwing the ball down the field more. Means more deep passes. So you better have a secondary who can cover because I think for that reason, offenses have to play the Saints more aggressive and throw the ball down the field.
Your defense won a Super Bowl, had some great seasons. I don't know if this is a sensitive subject with you, but how would you compare your defense when you played at its peak to the defense that you're seeing this year?
Yeah, I just had this question just yesterday. I've answered a couple of times, really, the past couple of weeks, the way this defense has been playing. And I said going into this season, this defense, to me, could be the strength of this team. First time in Sean Payton era that the defense would be the strength of the team. And I saw those glimpses last year when they started to win games, when Drew wasn't playing as well, when the offensive line wasn't playing as well, and the defense took over. All those pieces are back. I think, to me, Mike, to answer your question, until they win a Super Bowl, until they win a ring, I have to just say this. They are probably more talented than us on paper when you look at them athlete for athlete. I think this is the best front four that Coach Payton has had since he's been there. They can win one-on-one battles. They can rush forward and play 7 in coverage. And we used to have to blitz guys and manufacture pressure to get after the quarterback a little bit. And we got a lot of turnovers doing that, but we also gave up some big plays. And I think this defense, talent-wise, probably has us.
The big similarity I see, though, is when you guys won in 09, Greg Williams really emphasized turning the ball over. And I remember counting how many different players would score a touchdown because so many defensive guys scored touchdowns that year, complemented with the way Drew Brees would spread the ball around. I see the similarities in this defense. There are so many guys that shine and make plays. We see it every series, it seems like a different guy that steps up. I see that comparison with when you played in this defense too.
Yeah, you hit it perfect. I was just going to say that I think the sign of a great defense or a really good defense is week in and week out, your great players continue to play great, but there's always somebody else along that defense who plays their best game. And it may change every single week. And to do that, you need guys who are smart. You need guys who are competitive. And you need guys who are available, meaning not injured. So this defense has been able to do that so far this year. And it's going to become about taking the ball away. Eventually, when you get in the playoffs, you're going to have to take the ball away. So we'll see if this Saints team ends up adding more pressure and blitzing, or if they just sit back and let their front four do the work. But so far, it's been a good formula, letting Cam and Davenport and now Rankins just go get the quarterback.
And how much fun does that make playing on a defense when everybody's contributing, everybody's feeling like they're a part of it?
Absolutely. It's exciting, guys. You get a little extra bounce in your step when you go into those film meetings and you're lifting weights, and the week gets really long. When you get there at 6 a.m. and you leave at 6 at night, it's part of the grind that people don't see. You turn on the TV on Sunday and that's what you see, but there's a grind in between there that you have to enjoy doing what you do and working with the guys you work with. And I think the one thing that was always special about our team that I see with this team is guys are genuinely happy for their teammates when they make plays because they want to win, but they also feel good because they love and they care about each other, and that's a great sign as well.
Yeah, I really saw that with the defensive line, and they had 6 sacks against the Bucs. And one thing I've always liked about Cam Jordan is for a big guy who terrorizes opposing offensive lines and quarterbacks. He's such a gentle giant, so involved in the community, such an approachable guy. But he's also a guy who always gives credit to the David Onyematas, the Shelton Rankins. Now you have Marcus Davenport contributing as well, and the D linemen all sit together in the locker room. And when we talked to him afterwards, it was almost like none of them wanted to talk about themselves. They really like what they were doing as a unit. And Shanle, to me, they're so young. Their upside is what's really exciting about those guys.
It really is. When you look at just speaking of the defensive line, I mean, there's a lot of first-round picks up there. They've invested a lot into that defensive line because if you want to win the NFL, you got to get a pass rush. And what these guys are doing is they're winning one-on-one battles. But I also think what you're speaking about, the camaraderie and the credit, is there's a lot that goes on besides just beating somebody one-on-one. They're running stunts where maybe one of the defensive tackles has to chip off and get a piece of that right tackle so that Cam can loop underneath and come free. So there's a lot of teamwork involved in some of those pass rush stunts that go unnoticed, but it's a lot of unselfish football that's being played. And they also know, hey, when my time to make a play, I'll make a play. When my time is there to help somebody make a play, I'm more than happy to do that as well.
Before we get to Drew Brees, I thought it was interesting. Cam Jordan during the week had kind of called out Donovan Smith, who's the left tackle for the Bucs, just saying, they feel very confident. And the way they manhandled that Bucs offensive line, especially late in the game, you don't see that too often. I mean, they just took over that game at the end.
They took over that game, and obviously Teddy was the story because he's a quarterback and he played well, and he should have been the story because he really played outstanding. But my takeaway from the game was just how dominating the defensive line was. And it was the same Bucs offense that went out a week earlier and went and saw Aaron Donald and Michael Brockers and Dante Fowler and Wade Phillips defense, and they scored 55 points on them. So I think you just look at this Saints defense. To me, right now, they're a top 5 defense. I don't know where they are in the rankings. I don't think they're that high. They've given up some yards, but just when you look at them talent-wise, there's a lot of teams that would like to have this defense on Sunday.
All right, let's get to Drew Brees. And I want to tell a story before we get to our exclusive TV interview with him that we play on our podcast. I took an Uber on my way back from New Orleans after the game, the Monday after the Bucs victory. And this Uber driver was telling me about picking up Drew Brees and Brittany at their house. And, I get a lot of people, because I've interviewed Drew after every game for the last 13 years. And a lot of people say, he seems like a good guy, but is he really a good guy? Because I think sometimes we talked about this on past podcasts that the Antonio Browns of the world kind of, I think for the average fan, all athletes are entitled or they're this or they're that, but it's really not that way. Most of them are really, fun to be around and we have good conversations. But she was telling me she picked up Drew and she, didn't really know it was Drew Brees until he came out and he walked up to her and he said, "Hi, I'm Drew." And she looked at him. She said, "Yeah, I know who you are." And then Brittany got in the car with him. And she said the whole time they were, asking about me and what I did. And they obviously were in a hurry, but they were really engaging. Before we get to the Brees interview, Shanle, you've spent some time around Drew, obviously, and Brittany. I know your wife and you've gone out to dinner. I mean, I'm sure you get the same question. Is Brees really that good of a guy? And I don't know Brees like you do. I've been around him quite a bit. But I think that's the true judge of a person when you hear stories like that.
Yeah, I think, first of all, it's probably the top question I get when people find out I play for the Saints. It's, "Oh, you played for the Saints? Were you on the Super Bowl team?" And then is Drew Brees really as good a guy as he seems? Yeah, I mean, and I take a lot of pride in the fact that I can say yes. I take a lot of pride that I can say he's a great guy, most competitive guy I've been around, the best leader I've ever been around. And you could just tell people they love to hear – they love to be confirmed what they believe. And there's other guys that I say different, and you can tell I disappoint them. There's a lot of Cowboys fans. I tell them what my experience was like with the Cowboys, and it crushes them to find out what it was really like there compared to with the Saints. But going back to Drew, it's just he's one of those guys who I don't think there's any fake with him. There's no putting on a show. He is who he is. You either like him or you don't, and I think that's respectable. And the judge of somebody's true character is how they are when there's no cameras around or nobody's watching. And so that's a great story, Mike, about the Uber driver to confirm that he truly is a great person.
And, the one thing I've noticed about Brees, and you can confirm this, it seems like he takes time to get to know his teammates. Roman Harper always likes to tell me the story that they would always lift together. Roman said he'd like to do that extra lift on Friday so he'll look real cut come game day on Sunday. and Breeze would be in there, and they would have college bets and laugh about their music. And I remember when you first were hired by CST, we tried to ask him about you, and he would give us details about your personality. It seems like he just doesn't hide himself with the offensive guys. He makes his way around that locker room a little bit, doesn't he?
Yeah, he knows a little bit about everything, about everybody in the locker room. And Drew, besides being the most competitive person I've ever seen and a great leader, he is very intellectual, and we see that on game day by the way he plays football, but he doesn't miss anything. Everything anybody does, he picks up on body language, he picks up on those type of cues. Even if he's never talked to you, I think he can figure out what most people are like just by watching the way they go about conduct business and how their body language is. And he's a remarkable person that we were fortunate to get to play with the number of years that we did.
I think that's a big similarity that he and Sean Payton have too.
Yeah, Coach Payton is great at pushing buttons. He knows exactly what to say, when to say it, and more importantly, how to say it to different players. And I saw that in Coach Bill Parcells in Dallas. I think Coach Payton, to his credit, understood that's what kind of made Bill a great coach, and he took that along with him to New Orleans. Just you look at the different fun, motivational things he's done for guys and teams over the years. He just always has a pulse on his team, and that's what really separates him from some of the other coaches.
If you're listening to Scott Shanle on a podcast, A, we appreciate it, and B, you'll find out that you're not going to hear this kind of insight on any other podcast. You're also not going to get the kind of interviews we're going to give you. We're going to give you Drew Brees. Until he comes back, he's only going to talk to us. And we have some subjects that I asked him about. First, let's talk about Teddy Bridgewater. Obviously, he's the ultimate competitor. He wants to be out there, but he's a team leader. He wants the team to win. And Teddy Bridgewater's play last week opened a lot of eyes, not only around the league, but with Saints fans a little bit who were doubting him. Opened my eyes for sure. Here's Drew Brees on Teddy Bridgewater's big game, kind of breakout game against the Bucs.
He's very diligent and very focused and disciplined, and he's got his process. Let's not forget, Teddy was a successful starting quarterback in this league, for a few years in Minnesota before coming to us. And so, he has a way of doing things in a way that gets himself ready to play, and he's a very intelligent guy.
You would expect Drew Brees to say those things, but Shanle, how amazed are you that they're 3-0 in this stretch that we saw that, we knew was going to be challenging at Seattle against Dallas, and then a Buccaneer team that seemingly has been, kind of a makeover with Bruce Arians. How surprised are you with the 3-0 record with Bridgewater?
I'm extremely surprised, and it has nothing to do with Teddy. I would have been surprised if they would be 3-0 or have the record they have with Drew at quarterback, to be honest. I thought this was one of the toughest schedules in the NFL, especially to start the season. And to be sitting where they are right now and knowing that Drew didn't even play for 3 games, I think they're extremely happy. The back part of this schedule is not near as tough. If they can stay healthy, my prediction of 11-5 season will be crushed. This team has a chance to win a lot of games. A lot of it depends on how tough the NFC South is going to be, because we really haven't gotten into the NFC South yet. But to be where you are after that schedule and that start, I'm extremely shocked, and that's with or without Drew Brees.
And suddenly, Jacksonville and Chicago look a little more vulnerable. Those are road tests, but they don't look as good as maybe they did even the last couple of weeks. Well, more with Drew Brees. He released that video of him throwing the football, and the Who Dat Nation went crazy. Maine, the media went crazy. He clarified that video with me after the game.
I know a lot of Saints fans were happy the way they saw you throwing the football, and you look comfortable throwing the football. How did you feel throwing?
I felt good. Again, it was a small ball, a lighter ball. But that's kind of the trajectory, right? You just take it one step at a time and start light and work your way back up. And, again, I've got these benchmarks in my mind, and we'll just keep marching forward.
But I like the way he released it on social media. Shh, don't tell anybody. Man, he can't wait to get back on the field, Shanle.
Yeah, it was interesting to see that. It caused quite a stir and quite a commotion, but it was great to see that he was already able to grip the ball. Even if he released to you and broke the news that it was a smaller ball, it's still really impressive that he was able to grip anything, to spin it, to hold it that way. I think it's a good sign that he's healing up in a good time frame. To me, I would still like to see him wait through the bye week, but it's going to be up to Drew and how he feels. But I think if this team can get through the next 3 games and then get the bye week, get Drew back before NFC South play starts to be nice.
You know how they think in that building, though. If Bridgewater continues to play like he did against the Bucs, I mean, to me, that would almost make it after the bye week, wouldn't it? I mean, they don't need him until after the bye week. Rest as long as you can. Or how do you think they approach that with Bridgewater playing better and better every week?
I would say, regardless of what happens, even if you have a hiccup and say we get some road woes and we lose to Jacksonville and Chicago because those are 2 solid teams, I still don't think it's worth bringing Drew back to play the Arizona Cardinals before that bye week. I think, if you get Teddy to play against Arizona at home, I think that's a win. And then you get a whole nother week for Drew to rest up that thumb. So regardless of what happens, to me, there's no point in Drew coming back until after the bye week.
I agree 100%. And I'm glad we're talking about that because Drew Brees had some very interesting comments with me about his future on where he is in his rehab and when he will return, his real mindset about that.
I've never been through this before. I know what feels normal, right? It's not normal yet. And at the end of the day, I want to put our team in the best position to win, right? And so I'm not going to rush myself back just so I can get back out on the field and not be who I need to be, right, for this team. So I'm just going to take it one day at a time and see if we can fast track this. But, listen, the team's playing great, and more importantly that, we're growing.
I thought that was the most interesting comment he gave me after the game, Shanle, because he said, basically, I'm not going to rush myself back. And I think there was kind of a narrative before that he might do that. And he kind of put the brakes on all that.
Yeah, I think if the Saints were 1-2 or 0-3 in his absence, hey, he's fast tracking like there's no tomorrow and maybe trying to convince the NFL to use a small ball in the games. But the fact that the team's playing so well, it takes the pressure off him to like he said, fast track that injury because he's a competitor. He wants to be on the field, but he also, just like we talked about having good guys in the locker room and rooting for one another, he is excited that Teddy's playing as well as he is. And as long as the team's having success in his absence, now it buys him a little bit more time to make sure he's 100% before stepping back out there.
All right, before we get to our most exciting part of this podcast, more likely, let's talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars next up on the docket. This is a team that's, they've had their ups and downs the last couple of years. They were, really a couple plays away from making the Super Bowl 2 years ago. Then last year they had a down year. This year they seem back with the hottest guy in the NFL, arguably Gardner Minshew, the guy with the stash, the 6th-round, maybe modern-day Tom Brady. Okay, I'm getting a little carried away. But he's a hot guy in Jacksonville. What do you think of this Jacksonville team? They're kind of a wild card, always had a good defense, continue to have a good defense. But you played when Doug Marrone was on the staff. You know all about him as well.
Doug's a great coach. And Doug was exactly what that organization needed, along with Tom Coughlin. And they brought a toughness to that team. And they maybe have missed their window as far as pushing the Patriots in the AFC. A couple years ago, they had a wonderful defense. Haven't played up to that level. Obviously, all these issues with Jalen Ramsey. But, the closer this game gets, we'll make our predictions. The more scared I get about this Jacksonville team. I watched them play Carolina last week. They look pretty good. And this Gardner Minshew, it is not – he's not getting this much hype just because of the goofy mustache and the goofy clothes. This guy, he's got a 105 rating, and he's got 9 touchdowns, 1 interception. To me, he's playing better than Nick Foles would have played had Nick Foles not gotten hurt.
Wow, interesting. When's the last time you wore jorts like Gardner Minshew, Shanle?
Man, I don't think I've ever have, and either that or it's just selective memory, and I'm hoping I never wore them.
Yeah. Justin, you ever wore jorts in your life?
Maybe when I was a little kid.
Yeah. Have any of you grown a mustache in your life?
No.
Shanle?
I've had a beard and then shaved it down to a goatee, then shaved it down to a mustache, but never wore a mustache in public, no. So I've seen myself with a mustache, and it doesn't look good.
Yeah, nice. I have the ultimate baby face. I can grow a strong goatee, but there's no way I could grow a beard. And if I had to grow a mustache like that, I'd like to ask him. I wonder when he started that. Maybe his sophomore year at Washington State, because that takes time to get that kind of deal going on. Well, listen, we previewed the Jags. We talked to Drew Brees. We've gotten great perspective from Scott Shanle. But now, Justin, you know what time it is. More likely, 3 hypotheticals. Sometimes I make these up as I hear Shanle give me these great perspective answers from his days playing with the New Orleans Saints. I'm going to begin with this, though. We've talked about all of this throughout the podcast. I'm going to bring back Justin. Justin will go first in Shanle, and then I get the advantage because obviously I know these questions. But if you had to give a game ball, just one game ball, so many to give after that Bucs game, would it go to Teddy Bridgewater, who had the breakout game? Would it go to Marshawn Lattimore, who was such a vital cog in that defense? Or how about the guy they call like double first-round picks or something like that, Marcus Davenport, who had 2 sacks, part of that six-sack effort by the defensive line? You go Bridgewater, Lattimore, Davenport.
I think I have to give it to Teddy. Everyone's been wondering if he could have the kind of game that he had. And, we knew he was a game manager, but did he have it in him to go 4 touchdowns, over 300 yards? And he proved that he could. And I think that bodes very well for the Saints offense going forward and sets us up perfectly while Drew is out. So I think Teddy's definitely proved that he's a starter QB after these last 3 games. I think you have to go with Teddy.
All right. You have Teddy. Shanle, what do you have?
I'm agreeing with Justin. I'm going with Teddy. To me, you're only going to go as far in this league as your quarterback will take you. And this is a quarterback-driven league. It's a quarterback-driven team, especially with Coach Payton calling the plays. You look at the score. I mean, the Saints won 31-24. If Teddy doesn't play as well as he did, who knows what the outcome of that game was. He played almost a perfect game. And so I think you got to give it to Teddy just based on the expectations and the weight that is on him to play like that every week.
I want to disagree and give it to Lattimore. I think Lattimore had a great game, but I think a lot of throws Jameis Winston missed, and that offensive line was bad. That kind of helped Lattimore in some ways. I don't want to take too much away, but yeah, Teddy Bridgewater, he's not the quarterback who throws for over 300 yards and 4 touchdowns often. They really needed him to have that kind of game. And boy, I love the fact that Jared Cook got a little more involved too. We've been waiting on that. That's big for this offense, and that's big for Teddy Bridgewater. So game balls all around for Teddy Bridgewater. Okay, I left this guy out of our Jacksonville preview because I wanted to save him for more likely. But many who listen to our podcast are LSU fans and love Leonard Fournette when he played at LSU. Leonard Fournette's had an up-and-down career in his 3rd season in the NFL. It's still very early, but right now, more likely, how would you judge Leonard Fournette? Is he average? Is he good? Or do you think one day he'll be great, Justin?
Average, good, or potential to be great?
Yeah. Do you see the potential in what he's done so far? He can be great. You think he'll just be average, or do you just think he'll be good?
Well, talent-wise, he's definitely above average. I haven't had the luxury to watch too many Jaguars games. I know he's been great the last 2 weeks. I definitely think he has the physical ability to be really good in the future. I definitely don't think he's average, but I think up until these last 2 games, some people have been frustrated with what they thought would be another Adrian Peterson type running back. And it seems like you said, his up and down career, I think he has the potential to be really good. And he's starting to show that. He just needs more consistency.
Yeah, he started like gangbusters his rookie season. I mean, he rushed for over 1,000 yards, had 9 touchdowns, and played in 13 games. But after that, he only played in 8 games last year. He's played in every game so far this year. But Shanle, how do you view Leonard Fournette?
I think Leonard has the potential to be great. I felt like he should have been maybe the top pick in the draft the year he came out, and last year that didn't look like such a great idea. He had a down year last year, but to me, Leonard, the way I look at his talent is the best thing that can happen to him is that Doug Marrone and Tom Coughlin remain a part of that organization if he's going to be there, because I know they're going to put good offensive linemen around him. They're going to put the pieces around him. You need a quarterback who can throw, you need receivers who can catch, or you're just going to face 8-man boxes and they're going to stack the box and take you out of the game every week. So the way I look at this question is, if I took Leonard Fournette and put him on the Rams, or I put him on the Cowboys, or I put him on the Saints, how good would he be? And to me, I think he'd be great. I'll give you an example of this year. He's kind of flying under the radar, but Leonard Fournette is actually having a much better year than Alvin Kamara. And we can all agree Alvin Kamara is pretty great. He's got 95 carries for 512 yards. It's a 5.39 average, and Kamara's averaging 4.56. So he's having a great year. Unfortunately, Jacksonville doesn't play in primetime a whole lot, so I don't think he's getting that recognition yet this year.
Shanle bringing the research. He didn't even know I was going to ask about Leonard Fournette, throwing out big numbers on the podcast. The only thing I ever worried about Leonard Fournette, I thought he'd be a great pro, but he was hurt so much in college. He's been hurt already in his career. You see guys that are durable for the most part, and a lot of it's, you get unlucky. I mean, a lot of it's luck plays a part in it, but durability was something I always worried about with Leonard Fournette, but there's no question he's talented. He's on pace. He already has 512 yards rushing this year in 5 games, so he's averaging over 100 yards per. I think if he stays healthy, there's no doubt about it, he can be great. I covered Jacksonville. This is how old I am. When Fred Taylor was Fred Taylor was the lead back in the day when they were almost in the Super Bowl. They kept losing the Titans. That kind of forced them out of the Super Bowl a few years though. But Fred Taylor, to me, is one of the most underrated guys in NFL history. I think he's kind of like Deuce in some ways. If Deuce or Fred Taylor, Scott, would have stayed healthy, I think both of them could have been Hall of Famers.
Yeah, that's a good comparison, bringing up 2 running backs with the same matchup we have this week. There's a lot of great players that people don't quite put them in the upper echelon with the other easy names like Emmitt Smith and Barry Sanders and those guys. Those guys are obviously cream of the crop, but I agree with you. Deuce's career was cut short, and he was one of the best running backs in the NFL during his time. Fred Taylor the same way. Just a lot of different circumstances. Usually it comes down to injuries, coaching changes, things like that. But it's a good comparison with those two. And I think Fournette has a bright future, but he needs structure. He needs Tom Coughlin and Doug Marrone in his life.
And Deuce, I'll give him a little nod over Fred Taylor. Fred Taylor had Tony Baselli. He had some great offensive lines. Deuce played some bad teams and still put up big numbers. Whenever he was healthy, he put up huge numbers. So I give Deuce an edge even over Fred Taylor, who was so great back in the day. Okay, more likely number 3. This changes so early in the season, but it's really changed in the NFC, guys. My opinion of the Saints went kind of over the top in this last game, the way Teddy Bridgewater played. But who do you think is the biggest threat to the Saints in the NFC? And I know, we haven't reached even the halfway point of the season yet, but I think the Saints right now are the best team in the NFC. But who's the biggest threat? Would it more likely be the Niners, the Packers, or the Eagles?
You
could go off the board if you want to.
No, yeah. Actually, those 3 teams are the 3 I was kind of looking at anyway. The Niners look really impressive. They haven't really played anyone too difficult. I've been really impressed with Green Bay. I wasn't sure how well they would do coming into the year with the new head coach. And it's been interesting that they've shown they can win differently than they have been winning. I believe Aaron Jones has more touchdowns than Aaron Rodgers, which is kind of crazy to think about. Yeah. But and the Eagles are kind of interesting to me. They lost to a very bad Falcons team, but they also beat a very good Packers team. So I'm not quite sure if they're going to get it together or not. I think right now, to me, the strongest looking team has got to be Green Bay. The way they're playing, they beat a really good Bears defense at first tough game of the year, and they've been shown that they can win different ways. I think I wouldn't be surprised if the Packers are the team to beat to go to the Super Bowl at the end of the year.
Interesting. If you edited a bunch of exchanges between the young new head coach LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers, you would think the Packers were in last place right now. But they're playing great football and they're playing complementary football to their great quarterback. But Shanle, more likely, what do you think is the biggest NFC threat to the Saints right now?
I'll go over the NFC, but I really believe the Saints are the best team in the NFL. I don't think the Patriots have played anybody. I would love to play in the AFC East and play the Jets and the Bills and the Dolphins twice a year. So, hey, congrats, New England. You're going to get a number 1 seed again because of the schedule you play. But I think the Saints are the best team in the NFL. Let's go to your question, Mike. The NFC, the Packers, I think, opened up everyone's eyes last week, and they really opened my eyes. But when I look at from a matchup standpoint, come playoff time, who do I think can give the Saints the biggest problem? I don't know if it's the Packers because they have Adams as a wide receiver. Jimmy's getting older, but I just think the Saints defense can match up really well against the Packers offense. There's not a whole lot of offensive wide receiver threats that scare me on that team down the field. Their defense has improved. To me, it's still the Dallas Cowboys. And I know the Saints took care of business and the Packers embarrassed them. I just think when everything being equal, everyone's healthy, come playoff time, we're just assuming Gallup, Cooper on the outside, that's a tough matchup. You have Elliott at running back. He's better than any running back the Packers have. And I think Dallas's defense is really, really good. So to me, it's still the Cowboys.
Yeah, I want to see more from the Niners. I was really impressed with them against the Cleveland Browns, who are just kind of a mess right now. I don't know if they're going to get back on track, but you look at Justin touched on it. The Niners really could have lost to the Bucs if Jameis Winston didn't have all those pick sixes in week number 1. Then they blow out the Bengals, big deal. The Steelers are not very good, and then you have the Browns. But I want to see how the Niners do against the Rams. They have Carolina on the horizon. They have Seattle. Their schedule is really not that hard, but actually they have the Packers, the Ravens, and the Saints in a stretch later in the season. So, they still have the Rams twice. They still have the Seahawks twice. So the Niners, I think it's a little bit too early. But out of all those, I have to agree. I mean, the Packers, to me, are doing things, they need Aaron Rodgers, but they're really helping Aaron Rodgers, which makes that team dangerous. But I agree with you, Shanle. I really like the Saints more than any team in the NFC. And the Patriots are struggling offensively. I mean, they were so desperate they had to bring that Antonio Brown guy in there. They quickly got rid of him. So I think they know offensively they're challenged quite a bit. So we'll see what happens before the Saints are looking good. All right, let's get into predictions. I came back to the pack, and if my math is right, Shanle was the only one that picked the Saints over the Bucs last week. We should bring back the applause button for that, by the way, Justin. So Shanle and I are 4-1, just like the Saints this season. Justin is 3-2 because Justin and I had the.
I thought Justin picked the Saints. No,
no, I picked the Bucs to win.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay,
yeah. I wish there was a 3-way tie, but we have a 1-game lead. But the season is a marathon, guys, not a sprint. So Shanley's 4-1. I'm 4-1. Justin's 3-2, but Justin can make a move. Let's start predictions. Saints at Jacksonville. Our voice of reason, Justin Thomas. What do you think?
I think the Saints are going to stay on a win streak. I saw what Carolina was able to do versus that Jaguars D. They ran for 285 yards, which is insane. I don't think the Jaguars are going to give that much yards. But I do think that plays well into the Saints' hands. They're going to run the ball well, set up some play action for Teddy. I just think the Saints look so much better than the Jaguars. I think the Saints' D is better than the Jaguars' D, and I think their offense has shown they have the potential to be better than the Jaguars' offense. So I think at the end of the day, Saints pull it off. I'm going to go 27-20.
27-20, okay. Mr. Shanle, what do you think?
The closer this one gets, the more maybe I'm overthinking it, but I'm getting worried. I think Jacksonville wins this game. I think it's going to be 21-17 type game. My concern is I just said the Saints are the best team in the NFL. they and it goes against everything I just said. They beat the Cowboys. They turn around, beat the Buccaneers, who were another team coming off a big win against LA. The fact that the Saints are going on the road scares me. They played at Seattle, but the way they looked in LA worries me. To ask Teddy to come back and play the same way he did against the Bucs defense, do that again against Jacksonville, I don't know if that can quite be done. I just think more the fact that it's a road game against a good Jacksonville team. I think the Saints are due for a letdown after playing really good football the last 3 weeks.
Interesting. I point to that LA game, but I just think it was uncharted territory. And I don't know if I asked you this at the time, but if you would have played in a game, let's say after you knew Drew Brees was going to be Drew Brees in New Orleans, and he was that durable guy, and he goes out, I mean, how does that affect a team when you're used to your guy being the guy and never getting hurt? I mean, how does that shake up the whole team?
It definitely takes the wind out of the sails, yeah. And the team looked deflated, that's for sure. I just don't know if I don't think we can expect this defense to score or the special teams to score this week. I think the offense is going to have to do it. And on the road against a good Jacksonville team, I just think that this is ripe for a letdown week.
Interesting. Well, the Jaguars have lost to Houston, who the Saints beat. They lost to Kansas City in the opener. They beat Tennessee. They beat Denver. Neither one of those teams is very good. And they lost to Carolina, which all of a sudden Kyle Allen is Johnny Unitas. We kind of got to figure that guy out a little bit. So, I mean, they don't have a winning record. I'm on the Teddy Bridgewater bandwagon. I didn't know what to think of Steady Teddy. He's more than Steady Teddy now. I love the fact that Jared Cook is getting more involved. I love the fact Latavius Murray's kind of getting more involved. And I always like the Taysom Hill factor. Shanle, I'm going to overtake the lead this week because I think the Saints not only win on the road, I think they win in impressive fashion, and they win 34-17 in Jacksonville. It may be close for a quarter, but man, I was really impressed with Bridgewater, and I like what the Saints team is doing. So how about that?
I hope you're right. I do. I don't see it happening on the road against a physical Jacksonville team. And that's not to say that the Saints aren't physical. It's just it's hard emotionally to stay at the level they've been playing at the last 3 weeks.
Right. Take that, Jacksonville, or whatever you want to call it, Duval, or whatever the hell that is. Well, listen, you know what? I really appreciate people who listen to the podcast coming up to me at games and saying they listen. I had a fan along with his dad who were season ticket holders come up to our pregame show and say they like what we're doing. We really appreciate the feedback. You know, if you go on iTunes and rate us and tell your friends, your neighbors, your extended family, we really appreciate it. We're on all the platforms. We're on iTunes. We're on Podbean. We're on Stitcher. We're on Spotify. We're on Google. And Justin, we're getting more followers on Twitter. What's our handle?
At Dundat Podcast.
At Dundat Podcast. So you can always be the first to get our podcast when we release it on Twitter and all our platforms. So please subscribe. Please rate us. Tell us what you think. Tell us what you would like us to bring to the podcast. We try to bring you something a little bit different every week, but we always appreciate you logging on and tuning in. For Scott Shanle, my partner, for our voice of reason, our producer Justin Thomas, I'm Mike Nabors. We'll recap the game and talk to Drew Brees exclusively again next week. Thanks again for listening.